This is hands down one of the best shows I've ever watched. Out of the 10 episodes, there was not one single miss. There's been a lot of people who've drawn comparisons to Game of Thrones, and I'm definitely one of them. Now, before I get any hate, I want to let you know I do not make this comment lightly as a huge fan of the show and the books. But Shogun captures everything that makes the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones the best show on television. The subtle political intrigues, the rivalries, the multiple different factions and their cutthroat actions, the many in-depth characters and their own personal motivations that guides every single decision they make, all while taking place in a breathtaking feudal Japan. And that's not only because of the set pieces and the cinematography, albeit they did an amazing job at that as well. I mean, just look at this. Things as basic as simple conversations are taking place in stunning gardens or imposing castles. But I think the main reason why the world feels so immersive is because of how well they flesh out every single little detail, from the characters to their culture and history and how it all influences the present. And we learn all this through the perspective of Jon Blackthorne. And I know this is kind of an overused trope of the protagonist not knowing the setting of the story, so when anything is explained to them, it is simultaneously being told to the audience. But to the writer's credit, at times they implement this trope in subtle ways. Yeah, there are a lot of moments where they just directly tell something to him, but there's also some other instances where it's shown to us instead, by having our main protagonist think on the fly and or analyze his surroundings. This is a unique way of not only explaining the world around Jon Blackthorne, but also giving a bit of character development to him, as throughout the story we continuously see him adapt to the ever-changing political landscape. And speaking of him, the characters are the #1 selling point of this show. Every single one of them, to a certain degree, are interesting to watch as you slowly get to understand their motivations, with my favorite being Mahiko, as she struggles to carry her family's burden on her shoulders throughout the story, to the point where she just doesn't want to live, but ultimately is compelled by her duty and loyalty to keep moving forward. And I can't talk about my favorite moment with this character because it would be a huge spoiler, but for those who know, you know, the balls she has to do what she did is just insane. In fact, I really love the finale as it's one of the only times you really see a shit ton of combat. They don't show a lot of fight scenes throughout Shogun, so when there is some level of violence going on, it's extremely impactful to the plot, and I really appreciate that. For example, and I'll try to keep it vague enough to not spoil, but there's this one character who does a very rash action which results in said character's own death, which completely comes out of left field and had my jaw hit the floor in shock. But it wasn't a pointless death, as it gives an enormous opportunity to another character, who before thought it was all over but now had a glimmer of hope and time to plan. It's just amazing writing, as every single scene either pushes the character development, the plot, or the world of Japan, which makes the pacing for each of the episodes perfect. Like I said before, there's not a single miss. Watching this show week by week was agonizing, especially towards the latter half of the first season. And speaking of the first season, the last thing I want to quickly talk about is the fact that there's only going to be one season. And I cannot stress this enough how much I love a piece of media that doesn't drag itself out. In this day and age where franchises are milked more than actual cows, with either multiple seasons, shows, movies, games, etc., to the point where people just lose interest in the original vision of the story. Shogun, on the other hand, has a clear point A to point B that it wants to go to, and it concludes its story in a meaningful way. And I know some people are going to inevitably bitch about how there's not going to be another season, but again, I couldn't disagree more, as it's so damn refreshing to have something that's a masterpiece from start to finish. Like, you don't need a damn viewer's guide on what seasons are masterpieces and what seasons you should avoid. I'm looking at you, Game of Thrones. My only slight criticism of the show, and it's not really even a criticism, it's just something I kind of wanted to see, is the Battle of Sekigahara. Now, I'm fully aware that the show wasn't about that at all. It was more focused focused on the political turmoil prior to it, as I'm pretty sure that it wasn't really even mentioned in the original book or show. Comment below if I'm wrong about that, but I think it would have been really cool if we got a modern depiction of one of, if not the most legendary battles in Japanese history. Again, it's not really a criticism, it's just something that would have been cool to see. Even if it was just a glimpse of the fighting, kind of like what we got to see at the end, but instead it was just armies assembling. But all in all, Shogun is simply a must-watch masterpiece. Flat out simple, just watch it. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, consider liking, subscribing, and comment below what I should do next. I really wanted to talk about the show earlier when the finale dropped, but I've been bedridden for the last week and I'm just now getting better. So if my voice sounds a little bit off, just know I'm still recovering and I'm really sorry about that. But again, thank you so much for watching.